Hey everybody. So, the new Unearthed Arcana for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition update, or the 1D&D or 5.5, whatever you want to call it, just recently came out. In fact, it came out only a couple of days ago as of the time of this recording. And it's a big one. This thing is 50 pages long, has 5 classes, and introduces an entire new weapon system to the game. So there's a lot to talk about, but today I just want to focus on the martial side of things. I just recently made a video talking about all of the problems that I think martial characters have, especially in 5th edition, and basically listed out all of the things that I want them to address in these kinds of updates. So I'll go ahead and probably list all of my main complaints on the side, and if you want to go back and watch that video to kind of get more detail on the exact kind of fixes that I'm kind of hoping for and expecting in this update, then I'll leave a link in the description and you can go watch that before watching this video, and then come back here and we can continue where we left off. Now, of course, this did only come out a couple days ago, like I said earlier, which means I haven't really had a chance to actually physically playtest these rules in a real game just yet. So this will be much more of a sort of first impressions, theory crafting style video, but to be fair, I do have a fair amount of game knowledge about Dungeons & Dragons and other games like this, so I feel pretty confident that I can make a fairly informed review of these rules based mostly on how they read. So, without much further ado, let's actually get into it, and I think there's no better place to start than the new weapon systems that they're introducing. So here I have the weapon table already brought up for us to look at, and right off the bat, you can probably notice the new mastery column added to the weapon table. So essentially the way this mechanic works is that you have properties, which are your normal mechanics that are specific to the weapon, things like two-handed, finesse, thrown, stuff like that. And then now you have the new weapon mastery column, which is a whole new set of fairly interesting abilities that you can only use if you have mastery in that weapon. And the way you get mastery is via either a class ability that seemingly all martial characters will be getting at first level, or via the weapon mastery feat, which just gives you a weapon mastery. So right off the bat, I do pretty much like this a lot. One of the main problems in 5e is that weapons feel incredibly samey. You can see a lot of abilities here, like there's a lot of words here, but in actuality, most weapons play incredibly similar to each other, and there's not really much difference in damage type either, so it pretty much just matters how much damage it does, and like whether you need to use it in one hand or two hands. There's a couple of abilities that matter, like if you can throw the weapon or not, or if you can use finesse so that you can use dex, but a lot of these properties are kind of bland and generic, whereas the weapon masteries are actually pretty interesting. And if we scroll down a little bit, here's what the actual weapon masteries are. I'm not going to go and read through all of these, but they are pretty interesting. So, like, you have Cleave, and this basically lets you make a second attack once per turn with a heavy weapon. Graze lets you deal damage if you miss, so it's kind of a nice sort of comeback mechanic. Nick is interesting because it lets you make an extra attack with light weapons, it seems. So, so basically, the light property, at an earlier playtest, they had the light property automatically give you an extra attack during your main attack action, but now it seems like they've reverted that so that it no longer... So basically it works like it does now, where if you're two-handing, or dual-wielding rather, you can use the light attack as a bonus action, but now, if you have weapon mastery, you can use it as part of your main action and free up your bonus action. That's kind of nice. And then a few of these, I mean, pretty standard stuff. Topple lets you trip people. Slow lets you slow them down. Sap I like because it gives disadvantage on attack rolls. That's something a lot of cantrips that can do, but martial characters can't, and I feel like that would really help with them sort of playing the role of the tank, being able to hinder enemies and make their attacks weaker. Now, push, this actually might be my favorite one because it lets you push a creature up to 10 feet away just as part of the attack. No saving throw, nothing. And it doesn't even have a limitation on it like, say, Cleave does. Cleave specifically says you can only make this extra attack once per turn. And that's kind of understandable. It is basically a free extra attack like when you're dual wielding. But push, you can use it any number of times per turn, and it pushes them 10 feet away from you. That's really significant, and it really helps solve another problem that is in a lot of 5e combat, especially when it comes to melee combat. You see, a common problem is that once the two sides of a conflict run into each other and clash, there's usually not much of a reason to, like, move anymore, because all the melee characters are within melee reach of each other, so the only reason you might have to move is when you kill your opponent and then need to move to get to within melee range of another character. But with the push property, now you can smack somebody and push them away from your party, and then, thanks to how movement rules work, you can follow them and then hit them again and keep knocking them away. Even if you only have 2 attacks, that's 20 feet of movement away from your party. If somebody is on your wizard and you want to get them off of them, you can just run up and smack them and push them away from you. I really think it's a fun way to just add a lot of variety to combat without actually having to, like, add extra damage or debuff or anything. Like, just the positional advantage that this gives you, I think, is super interesting. But yeah, other than that, these are all fairly typical. Vex, pretty good for rogues. It gives you advantage on your next attack roll. And that's seemingly all of them for now. There's only, like, about 10 or so of these abilities. I kind of would like to see more of them, but I think it's a good start, and it feels like they could add more over time, kind of like how they add spells over time. So it's definitely a step in the right direction. Though I do have some problems with how the ability is actually implemented, which I think I can cover when we move on to the classes, which we might as well do right now, starting with the Barbarian. Okay, so the Barbarian. In 5th edition, I personally feel like the Barbarian is the worst designed class in the entire game. Not necessarily the weakest. A lot of people would probably argue for, like, either the Ranger or the Monk in that category. No, I think the Barbarian is the worst designed class. And that's mainly because the original Barbarian, which I have pulled up here, almost all of their abilities are passive. There's almost no actual active abilities aside from Rage and Reckless Attack. And even then, it's not really super interesting. Rage is something you'll probably want to do on pretty much every fight, unless you absolutely know for certain that you're getting into another fight later that you won't have the Rages for. And so it's kind of like a false choice, because you're just always going to want to Rage. And Reckless Attack, it's okay. It's at least something that you have to make a decision on during your turn, but it's not exactly the most interesting ability. You get advantage, opponents get advantage against you. Big whoop. Other than that, all of the other abilities that they get, Danger Sense, Feral Instinct, Fast Movement, Brutal Critical, like, all of these abilities are passives. And even when you go into the subclasses, like, you get to make a choice. Like, for example, in the Totem Barbarian, you get to choose what kind of beast that you have. And that's a cool choice, I guess, but once you make that choice, that's it. It's just a passive ability that is always on all the time. Very few actual Barbarian subclasses give you any active abilities, and what that results in is a very, very boring class to actually play, because the only actual decision that you're making on your turn is whether or not you use reckless attack, and that's pretty much it. There's a lot that they can improve upon, to say the least. So let's actually look at what they have done to the Barbarian, because frankly, it can only go up from here. So right off the bat, like I said, everybody gets weapon masteries at first level. So just to touch on this real quick, since I was just talking about the weapons, the way that weapon mastery actually works as a mechanic, I think, is a bit weird. Because you choose a number of weapons to master, and that makes sense, but you can also change the weapons on a long rest, which I feel is kind of a flavor fail. Like, you can... it's supposed to be that you've spent, countless hours mastering these weapons, and yet you can also just somehow forget how you mastered those weapons, and then master a different weapon just after a night's rest. Like, it makes no sense to me, and I feel like it makes the ability less unique, because instead of being focused on a specific type of weapon, like at level 1 I decide I'm going to use axes, and that's the main thing I'm going to do from here on out, but then you could just wake up one day and go, oh, actually, I feel like using a club instead, and now you just are a master of the club. Like, I feel like there needs to be, ironically enough, more of a limitation on it, which could in turn open up more design space to make the ability more powerful. So I'm not necessarily saying that it needs to be nerfed, I'm just saying I think that I'd rather them shore up the flavor of the ability to really make it feel like you're actually mastering these weapons, and then maybe in exchange for that lack of versatility, add a little bit more power to it, like the ability to add damage to weapons you've mastered, or just something like that. There's numerous ways I think this could be done, to the point where I might make an entire other video on this. But anyways, moving on from the weapon mastery system, let's actually talk about the actual Barbarian abilities. So, right off the bat, we have Rage. And this is actually kind of interesting, and this is also a sort of pattern that comes up a lot with at least the Barbarian specifically. It's mostly the same as before, you get damage resistance, you get a little bit more damage, you get advantage on strength checks, that all makes sense, you can't concentrate or cast spells. Again, makes sense. But the way that Rage worked in 5th edition is that it lasts for a maximum of 1 minute, and you have to either attack a creature or take damage in order to maintain the Rage. If you just sit around doing nothing with a thumb up your ass, you lose your Rage. And, that could be kind of annoying. And that resulted in a number of emergent behaviors that I think they probably didn't approve of, because you had things like a barbarian holding a caltrop in their mouth so that they could bite down on it to take a point of damage in order to maintain their rage, or even so much as resorting to attacking themselves with their weapon. And that's, I think, not quite what they wanted to happen, so they've changed it now so that you can maintain your rage as a bonus action without actually having to do anything. And I think that is a significant improvement on it. On top of that, your rage can now last for up to 10 minutes, which makes it much more significant when you're outside of combat. Obviously, no combat in the world is going to last 10 minutes long. That's literally like 100 rounds, and I mean, if you're playing 100-round combat, then you have a braver table than mine. But yeah, this makes it much more interesting out of combat. And then, yeah, it says make an attack roll or force a saving throw. So it's a little bit more versatile in how you maintain your rage. So if you have some kind of ability, like a feat or something, that lets you force a saving throw, that means that you don't have to attack somebody to maintain the rage. And so, like, the bonus action to maintain your rage, it does use up your bonus action, but you don't have to do that every turn. That's just sort of to cover for when you're not able to actually attack someone. So, overall, very minor changes, but all for the better as far as I could tell. Moving on, Unarmored Defense, this seems to be pretty much the same, so not really much to talk about. So, then we have, at second level, Primal Knowledge. Now, this ability I like a lot. So a big thing I talked about in my last video complaining about martial characters, one of the biggest things is that they just don't have a lot of out of combat utility. The physical stats just don't have as many useful skills as the mental stats, and especially strength in particular. But this seems to address that almost very specifically. You see, the way this works is that while your rage is active, you basically can use your strength for all of these skills. Acrobatics, intimidation, perception, survival, and even stealth, weirdly enough, which is kind of hilarious, but I also kind of love it. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that not only are you getting to use your strength in place of, like, dexterity or wisdom, but because of the limitation where you have to use this while raging, which is a fair limitation, and you only get so many rages a day, but while you're raging, you have advantage on strength-based checks. So, not only are you using strength for all these skills, you're rolling them with advantage. Like, good luck sneaking past an angry barbarian, because advantage also gives you a +5 on your passive perception. So, basically, barbarians have, like, perfect eyesight. They can finally use intimidation with strength. Like, that really feels like something that should have been in the game a lot sooner. Like, it adds a lot of versatility to what the barbarian can do. It gives them a reason to rage outside of combat, especially now that it lasts 10 minutes. This is just overall a great addition to the class, in my opinion. It really actually lets you do something with rage other than hurt people. Then we have Reckless Attack. Again, like I said, kind of a meh ability. It's not bad. I don't feel like it's great. But, once again, very subtle details to keep in mind. In the original Reckless Attack, it specifically calls out that you only get advantage on melee weapon attacks. In this, it says attack rolls using strength. That is a huge difference, because now that means that barbarians can actually be unarmed and still get rage bonuses. Again, something that I feel like should have been in the game a while ago, but I'm glad to see it here. It also means that they can use thrown weapons while raging. Again, just adding to the variety of what they can actually do in combat is just a much needed thing that barbarians need. And in fact, something that I forgot to mention earlier that also helps this is the fact that barbarians are also able to get fighting style feats. These feats aren't in this particular playtest packet, but they talked about them previously, where fighting styles have been moved to feats, and everybody gets a feat at first level. So now they are able to augment their fighting style with a fighting style feat, in addition to the weapon mastery system. So now they actually have a good number of options in combat beyond just deciding whether or not they want to use Reckless Attack. So basically, overall, even if these are very incremental changes, this is a significantly better designed barbarian than the 5th edition version, in my opinion. Okay, now moving on. I feel like barbarians are fairly front-loaded, because now we're going into the more generic abilities. We've got subclass, whatever, feat, as usual, extra attack at level 5, good. Fast movement at level 5, also good. Subclass at 6, whatever. Feral Instinct, I think that's in the original Barbarian with Danger Sense. Well, kind of. I think you get Danger Sense earlier. So, oh, here we go. Feral Instinct. Actually, yeah, what happened to Danger Sense? I just realized that. Did they just get rid of Danger Sense? I guess that's what Primal Knowledge replaced. Oh, okay, yeah. So you have advantage on dexterity saving throws against things you can... So I think that Primal Knowledge effectively replaced Danger Sense, it seems. And then, yeah, Feral Instinct, I think that is... advantage on initiative rolls. Oh, okay, so they've added initiative and dexterity saving throws, just in general, rather than... Okay, yeah, so I think that basically... Yeah, and that essentially is where the rest of Danger Sense went. So, okay. So they kind of tie that all into Feral Instinct. That's fine, not really amazing. It's mostly just moving things around. Indomitable Might. Now, again, this ability isn't particularly like amazing or anything on its own. It's just a really simple. You get like basically you can't roll poorly on strength checks. But again, keep in mind, primal knowledge, my favorite new ability for barbarians, lets you turn all of these skills into strength checks. So not only are you rolling these skills with strength, with advantage, but at level 9, you can't roll lower than your strength score on all of those skills while you're raging. So they basically got the rogue ability that has that similar effect, but with strength, and that is pretty cool. So this is kind of, again, a subtle ability. Like, normal strength checks don't exactly come up all that often, but combined with the rage ability, that is actually quite good. Now, here we have Brutal Critical. I believe this is mostly the same as the previous one, but now it adds your whole Barbarian level. This is probably the first bad ability, in my opinion. I think they still get Brutal Critical in the original class, which is whatever. The problem with these kinds of abilities is that they're very situational. Or I guess situational isn't the right word. It's more that they just don't come up very often. You don't crit every turn, and you might not crit even every fight. And so as a result, this ability is just kind of a dead level. Like, you don't get anything else on level 11, as far as I'm aware. And as a result, level 11 just kind of becomes a dead level, just because you're almost not, like, this. You're not always critting things, so it's a bad ability. I don't like abilities like this that only come up on a very specific situation. And in my opinion, I honestly feel like Barbarian should get a third attack. Honestly, all martial characters, Barbarians, Monks, and Rogues, that don't already have 3 attacks, I really feel like they should get a third attack at level 11. Like, it would help them use the weapon mastery system that they added, because now they can use a third mastery in one turn, so it really helps them stand out a little bit more from classes like Ranger and Paladin, which aren't really full martial characters. So, like, they could get 2 attacks, and then the true martials could get 3, and then that would let them actually use these abilities, and it would help shore up this kind of thing with the level 11 ability, which kind of feels like a dead level. Other than that, we have Feat at level 12, that's normal. Persistent Rage basically just gets rid of the bonus action thing that you had to do. So, I mean, it's a nice boost, but again, it feels like a fairly light level. Like, it's nice, but I think they might need something a little bit extra at level 13, just because of how minor this is. Subclass feature. Okay, then we have Relentless Rage. I think this is very different from what it was before. So, yeah, at level 15 we have Persistent Rage, which is that it only ends if you fall unconscious, which is kind of more what the 13th ability is. And that's pretty much it. Whereas now, Relentless Rage actually kind of makes you a lot tankier now, which is what they should be. Barbarians are meant to be tanks. And so what Relentless Rage does is make it so that when you drop to 0, you can make a con save and immediately heal a fair amount of health just right away. Because at level 15, that's 30 health. Now, to be fair, that's only like a couple of attacks to bring you back down to 0. But Barbarians are also pretty good at con saves, and while the DC does continually go up every time you use this ability, at least before you take a short rest, which is really nice that it resets that quickly, I feel like they can use this ability a good number of times before they need somebody to actually help them get back up. So it's a nice boon to their tankiness. It's just generally good improvement. Level 17, whenever you roll initiative, you gain 1 expended use of your rage. Again, this is the kind of thing where, so a trend you can't really see it in this class because Barbarians already had rages that reset only on long rests. But they also did some similar things for the Fighter and some other classes in this playtest packet, where they seem to be trying to refocus things more on long rests than short rests. I kind of feel like rages are the kind of thing where you can still have a limited number of rages per long rest, but when you take a short rest, maybe you get back one of them. And I feel like that's a kind of ability that they could get much earlier on. And then this ability, where they regain a rage every time they roll initiative, could be the enhanced version of that ability. Otherwise, it's very high level. It's fine, I guess. It just kind of helps preserve the rage so that they always have it. And that basically just means that barbarians have infinite rage now. Which, again, it's fine. I feel like this is the kind of thing that maybe barbarians should get a weaker version of sooner. And then finally, the last ability is Primal Champion, and I don't really understand what they're doing here, because they actually nerfed the Barbarian Capstone. Primal Champion in the original game increases both Strength and Con by 4. Now, it only increases them by 2. And I guess the idea is that you combine it with the Epic Boon that everybody now gets at level 20, and that lets them increase it to 4 for one of those stats, but that still makes it weaker overall compared to what it was before. Now you're getting a 24 and a 22, whereas before you were getting two 24s. And on top of that, everybody gets the Epic Boon now, so it's kind of less significant when everybody else is now able to get a 22 in their favorite stat, and now the Barbarian can only get a 24 and a single 22. Like, if anything, you would think that you'd want the Barbarian to get their original ability and this to really help make them continue to stand out. Like, I just don't see why they had to nerf this ability. I would make this go back to giving you a +4 in both Strength and Con, and then the Epic Boon can raise that again, so that now you can get a 26 in either Strength or Con, and I think that would be a much better version of this. But yeah, so that basically puts an end to the general Barbarian. I don't think I'm going to bother covering this. I might as well go over the subclass. Just real quick, so this is the Berserker, basically the super generic Barbarian. Frenzy is made a lot better simply by the fact that it no longer costs exhaustion, which was absurd, and I can't believe they did that in 5th edition. Like, talk about bad design classes, that is easily the worst subclass in the game. The fact that you would get exhaustion from Frenzy is just bad. And then yeah, it seems like you get extra damage, and actually you get a fair amount of extra damage, and that's kind of nice. Mindless Rage is just generally improved. They kind of summarized everything here, where now it ends Charmed and Frightened rather than suspending them. Retaliation has been moved down, which just lets you make an attack of opportunity, which is pretty good. And Intimidating Presence is kind of interesting, because it seems to be a fear effect, where each creature of your choice within 30 feet, or 60 feet if your rage is active, so you don't even have to be raging, but it's stronger if you are, essentially makes a fear check, and then they can become frightened for an entire minute, and then they can try to end it on a saving throw. Now, they only get 1 per long rest, and, I mean, it's a 14th level ability. At this point in the game, things are kind of crazy. I feel like it should be more than once per long rest, either multiple uses, or make it a short rest so that they can use it multiple times throughout the day. That way Barbarians can be truly scary, but c'est la vie. This is sort of the generic subclass, so it's by no means going to be the most interesting or strong of them. That's really the only one I have a huge criticism for, is I feel like Intimidating Presence is just... I mean, don't get me wrong, the Frightened condition is powerful. I would love if I could use it more than once. Maybe if you just made it twice. I don't know. Like I said, this is just more of a first impressions. I might revisit this if I can actually playtest this later. But without much further ado, I think we should move on to the Fighter. Okay, so the Fighter. Now, they kind of mentioned that the Fighter is meant to be designed to work a lot more with the weapon mastery system. Although, one amusing thing that I had pointed out to me earlier is how the names of the weapon mastery related abilities are kind of backwards. Like, you get weapon mastery at level 1, then you get weapon expert at level 7, and then you get weapon adept at level... Like, isn't the progression usually you go adept, then expert, then master? Why does it go backwards? I feel like that's just like a weird note. I feel like you should get weapon adept first and then increase it over time. But that's literally just names. That's just nitpicking. So level 1 fighters get a bonus fighting style feat. That is kind of nice. Then you get Second Wind. Now, Second Wind is mostly the same as before, 1d10 plus fighter level, recover hit points as a bonus action. All good stuff, but they have changed it so that instead of it being once per short rest, it's now a limited number of times per long rest. Like I was saying before, this seems to be a trend in what they're going for, which I think is generally a good thing, I guess. It kind of removes the uniqueness of the class being based more around short rests that I think made them interesting, but a big problem in the game that I brought up in my previous video is that the difference in how often short rests and long rests are taken is kind of one of the main reasons why casters are so much stronger than martial characters, because when you're not taking as many short rests as you should, then that means that short rest classes aren't getting back their resources as fast, and so casters just vastly outpace them in the amount of resources they have. I still feel like it would be interesting if maybe, like I said before, you have a limited number of uses per long rest, but you can maybe recover one or more of those uses when you take a short rest, and then you could limit that to like once per day, kind of like the wizard spell recovery feature or things like that, or just make it you recover one per short rest. Like, I think that would be a reasonable way to do that, and it would help give more tankiness to the fighter, since each one of these is a free heal effectively. Then we have Weapon Mastery, and the first level version of this is basically the same, but the fighter gets 3. I believe the Barbarian only got 2. Action Surge has been nerfed. It's mostly the same. You can still make a full attack with it, which is kind of the important thing that most fighters will be doing, but notably you cannot take, say, the magic action with it, or use any kind of, like, other ability or feature. So, like, if you get an ability from a feat that uses your action, you can no longer use it with your extra action from Action Surge. I feel like that's a bit overkill. I feel like the main reason they did this is to prevent spellcasters from dipping into fighter so that they could cast multiple spells with Action Surge. So I feel like it would be better if they just said you cannot take the magic action rather than limiting it to just the attack, dash, disengage, or dodge action, so that it would open up the room for things like feat abilities or other class features to be used during your Action Surge rather than just being limited to the attack action. I feel like that is a little bit overkill, but it's not like it's the end of the world. Then you get your fighter subclass, feat, extra attack, all usual stuff. You get another feat. So they moved the bonus feat from 6th level down to 5th level because they were changing how the subclasses work, so that all subclasses give you the same level progression, essentially. So all subclasses give you a feature at 6th level, give you a feature at 10th level, and I believe 14th level. Yeah, 14th level is the other one. So they moved the feats around a little bit, so the 2 bonus feats that fighters get have been moved to 5th level, and the other one is, I believe, 6th... No. Where is it, actually? Wait a minute. They didn't get rid of it, did they? No, okay. Oh, no, it's at 15th level. It's at the same level you get improved Action Surge. Okay. So yeah, so they still get the same number of feats, and you do get this feat a little bit earlier, and while the other one is a level later, it's so high level in the game that if you're playing at that level, you're probably going to go all the way to 20, so I guess it's not that big a deal that you get it a level later. Honestly, I kind of wish that fighters would get like a 3rd bonus feat, or even more than that, but then maybe limit it, but that's a topic for another day. Either way, all usual stuff so far. Then we get to Weapon Expert. So this is kind of an interesting take on the Weapon Mastery system. Essentially, now you can customize your weapons a little bit to sort of mix and match what mastery properties they have. So like the longsword, for example, is a pretty good generic weapon that a lot of weapon mastery abilities can fit on, and that's actually the example they use here, where you could replace the flexibility, which is probably the weakest ability in the bunch, with something like the push ability, which, as I mentioned before, is my favorite ability. And this way you can kind of use the weapons that you want to use with the masteries that you want to use. So, I mean, it's okay, but I don't know. It's not. It doesn't actually increase your power in any way, and you could already kind of do this by just, as some people have been saying, golf bagging your weapons is, I think, the term. It's kind of a weird idea, but basically, fighters are now heavily incentivized to just carry around like half a dozen different weapons with different weapon masteries, and then due to the way the attack action works now in 1D&D, basically you can swap what weapon you're wielding between every attack. So now you get this weird situation where fighters are like, they whip out their longsword and stab you, then they quickly sheath it and whip out a maul so they can use a different ability, and then they sheath that and whip out, like, it's a strange end result of what this system is, and I'm not sure if I like that. And all that this ability seems to do is sort of lessen the load that requires you to golf bag your weapons. It's not super interesting to me, and I feel like I'd much rather have something where, like, instead of replacing the property, you can add a property and then combine the properties into one attack, where you can, say, use the flex and the push property in the same attack. That would be a lot more interesting to me, and it would really help the ability scale as you get higher in levels. Anyways, moving on, we have feat, normal stuff, Indomitable. So Indomitable was probably the worst fighter ability in 5e. Essentially, what Indomitable did was just let you re-roll a saving throw, and that was it. You didn't even get a bonus to it, so there was a good chance that you would use this ability and then re-roll the saving throw and then still fail, because if you're, say, making a mental saving throw and you don't have a high wisdom or whatever, it's not going to really help you that much to just roll it again. Whereas now, this Indomitable, you get a bonus equal to your fighter level, so that starts with a +9 and only goes up. So it still kind of would suck if you re-roll and you still fail the check, and then you still waste it. Like, I kind of would prefer if this ability was only consumed if you actually pass the check on the re-roll. That way you can keep using it until you pass the check. That would be kind of a nice anti-feel-bad mechanic. But I've also seen a lot of suggestions to just turn this into legendary resistance. Like, just make it so that if you fail the check, you can spend your Indomitable to auto-pass, and then that would be it. I think that would make much more sense as a once-per-day ability. Otherwise, I feel like you should get more uses of it, even with the bonus, much earlier on. Other than that, most of these, again, subclass, 2 extra attacks, feats, usual stuff. Then you get Weapon Adept. Again, the name is super weird. But so this is the Master of Weapons feature, where, like I was saying before, you actually add 2 properties to a single weapon, but you still can only actually use one of them per turn. So once again, all that this really seems to do is reduce the need to golf bag your weapons. Like, if you didn't get this 7th level ability and this 13th level ability at all, you would still be as strong, because you could just carry a bunch of different weapons and use them between every single attack by swapping them out. Like, these abilities don't actually increase the power of the character by any significant amount. Like, I mean, I guess it lets you swap out for, like, if you want to use a polearm and get that reach and apply a different ability to it. I guess that's something that these abilities let you do that you couldn't do by just golf bagging your weapons. But other than, like, that one specific scenario, I really feel like these abilities need to be reworked into something a lot more interesting. Okay, so then we have subclass feature level 14, improved action surge, same as normal, feat. Okay, unconquerable. So this is kind of interesting. So essentially you can the extra, instead of getting a second use of Indomitable, you can now spend second wind charges in order to use Indomitable multiple times. It seems kind of weird to link both to the same system, especially when you only get 4 second wins a day. Like, it's not that many uses, and now you have two abilities that are operating off of it. Now, to be fair, this does still heal you, as you would normally with Second Wind, and it technically is letting you use it outside of your turn, and I don't actually, does Indomitable... Yeah, I don't think Indomitable even uses your reaction, so it does, I guess, free up your bonus action a little bit, since you can now use it without spending any kind of action whatsoever. But, I mean, I feel like I said, Second Wind feels like it could use more uses if they're going to have a second ability also use the same resource. Like I said, either give us more per day, or let us recover one during a short rest, or like recover half of them during a short rest, but you can only do it once per day. Something like that I feel like would be better. Then you get 3 extra attacks at level 18. Again, as a capstone, I've always felt like this is kind of an underwhelming capstone for the fighter. It feels like you should get your 3rd extra attack like around level 16 or 15, because those are when like cantrips get their 4th power up. Because like cantrips, you get a power up at, I believe it's 5th, 11th, and 16, and yet fighters only get their 4th attack at level. I mean, they used to get it at 20, so I guess it's a little better that you get it at 18 now. But as a capstone, I've always felt like it's kind of underwhelming, and that they could do something a lot more interesting. Again, especially with the weapon mastery system, I feel like there's something more they could do, and then they could move this down to a lower level to maybe shore up that level a little bit more. And then that basically brings it to the end of the main fighter. So let's just give a quick look at the champion, which is the generic fighter subclass. So we have Adaptable Victor here. So this one just gives you more skills, I guess. Which, I mean, like I said, more actual utility is kind of nice. And it does let you swap them on a long rest. So it actually gives you a good number of skill bonuses if you like know what you're going in for and what you might need. You know, you can take a nap throughout the night and then ready yourself for a social situation. So that's kind of nice. But it's kind of a meh ability. Improved critical. Again, these kinds of critical abilities aren't super interesting, but at least you get it at the same level as Adaptable Victor. So it's, again, whatever. Bonus fighting style feat. Something that I would like to change about this and how it works. So, fighting style feats are a very specific subcategory of feats. And I think it would be a lot more interesting if these extra bonus feats, because like the fighter also gets a bonus fighting style feat at level 1, on top of the fact that all characters now get a feat at level 1, and then the champion fighter gets another fighting style feat at level 6. So I think it would be way more interesting if, instead of being limited to specifically fighting styles, these were like warrior-only feats. So you couldn't pick any generic feat like the ability score improvement or something like magical adept, but you could still pick any warrior feat, and that would be a lot more interesting to me, and maybe even make this subclass like actually like stand out a little bit because you're getting all those bonus feats. Then you have Heroic Warrior. You give yourself Heroic Advantage. I believe that's the new Inspiration ability, so you can basically provide advantage on almost any check at will. That's kind of cool, but again, the Champion is a very generic subclass. Superior Critical. This time you get even better critical hits, but again, this is something that only comes up when you would roll an 18, so it's not a very interesting ability, and like I said, now you're not even getting any other ability at the same level. Like, at least give me another fighting style feat or something at level 10. And then at level 14, the capstone of the subclass, we have Survivor. You attain the pinnacle of resilience in battle. So you have Defy Death. You get an advantage on death saving throws, and you get the benefit. You can crit on saving throws. I mean, I'll take it, but again, that's a very situational ability. It only applies after you've gone down. And then you have Heroic Rally. Now, this one is actually really good, I think, because you're getting effectively health regen. You get 5 plus your con mod at the start of each of your turn as long as you're at less than half your health. That's pretty good. And it really kind of makes... Like, I will say, this subclass is a million times more interesting than the base fighter champion subclass. Still feels kind of generic. I kind of wish that, like I said, the fighting style feat was more like general warrior feat, and that maybe you could get another one at level 10. Like, you could turn this into the... Instead of it just being a generic fighter, make it like the versatile fighter, where you're getting all of these bonus feats in addition to the normal bonus feats that fighters get. They could get another one at 6th level, another one at 10th level, and then you just get all of these customizable options to really build the fighter that you want to build, and that would make it a lot more interesting to me. So anyways, that just about concludes everything for the martial characters in this packet. Overall, I'd have to say that if I had to give this a grade, it depends on how harsh I want to be. Barbarian definitely gets the award for most improved. Like I said, Barbarians were bad in 5th edition, so the addition of weapon masteries, the addition of that primal knowledge, and the ability to use skills, like, Barbarians are infinitely more interesting to play now, even if I do still think there's a lot more that could be done. I wanna give them a B, maybe a B minus for this. They definitely did not fail in achieving the basic goal of making martial characters more interesting to play and giving them some fun tools to work with. But there's a lot of weirdness in the details of exactly how this works. The weapon mastery system, I feel, is kind of finicky, and I kind of want to do a whole breakdown on specifically just how I might change the weapon mastery system, because right now, the whole idea of golf bagging weapons, and even if the fighter gets abilities to reduce the need to golf bag your weapons, all the other classes that are getting weapon masteries are kind of restricted to having to do that, and again, that just seems like a weird flavor fail, and in addition to how the weapon masteries can be unlearned and relearned so casually, like, definitely work needs to be done, but overall, I like the abilities themselves that weapon masteries grant. And for the most part, they did buff pretty much all of these classes and give them some toys to play with. There were only a couple minor nerfs, and like I said, I feel like those could be changed fairly easily. I really don't see the reason to nerf the Barbarian Capstone and Action Surge. I understand the nerf, but I feel like they could, like I said earlier, just get rid of the ability to use magic actions, and that's really the only limitation I think needs to be placed on it. Other than that, there's a lot of good things here, but I still feel like I would love to see a lot more. We didn't see anything related to, say, AoE attacks. Or, at the very least, just ways to get more attacks out across more enemies without having to split up your damage as much. We also didn't really see a whole lot in terms of changes to resource management. Some things were added and changed to be long rests, which, again, I feel like it's a little bit weird. I feel like there's more that could be done with it. And there's still not a ton of versatility. Like, yeah, the Barbarian did get a pretty cool boon in their ability to use skills, but that's only while they're raging, and they only get a handful of rages a day. So, choosing to rage outside of combat so that they can apply their strength to one of their skills is a pretty big investment, in my opinion. So, there's still some resource management issues to consider. They don't really have much of an ability to still manipulate things like the action economy, and I also really wish we had seen more warrior-centric feats. We didn't really get much of that at all, and all we've really seen so far are the fighting style feats, and based on the fact that they're specifically calling those out as a type of warrior feat, I have to imagine there's going to be more warrior feats that aren't fighting styles, and those feats will have a dramatic impact on how good warriors will be. So I kind of want to see what those actually look like before I make a complete judgment on what's happening with martials. And other than that, like there's still a lot more that could be done to improve things. So like I said, I'll give them a B minus. Definitely, like I said, big improvements all around, but there's definitely a lot more to be done. So without much further ado, I think I'm going to call it there for today. If you liked what I did here today and you want to see me review more things like this, feel free to leave a comment down below letting me know, and feel free to subscribe so that you can get notified of when I might release more videos like this one. And feel free to let me know if you want to see me break down the rest of the content in this playtest packet. They did also release the Wizard, Sorcerer, and Warlock classes in this, and there are some interesting things that they did to those classes as well. And there's also some other systems that I'd like to look at. Like, for example, I know Black Flag already released their fighter preview for their system, and that's an offshoot of 5e being developed by Kobold Press. And so I might take a look at that as well to kind of compare and contrast what they did with what Wizards did to see which one is actually looking better. So, anyways, thank you very much for watching. This has definitely gone on a little bit longer than I thought it would. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.